Hey everyone. Tonight we begin in a mud-choked trench, where the only sound is the drip of water off a rusted helmet and the measured exhale of a sniper lining up his shot. Each breath steady as a loaded rifle. You've heard tales of tank assaults and bayonet charges, but the deadliest war was waged in perfect stillness by marksmen hidden in the mire. This isn't about sweeping offensives, it's about the sniper's world, where every heartbeat is a countdown and every flicker of movement becomes a life-or-death calculation. If unraveling history's quietest killers helps you unwind, please like and subscribe. And hey, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And what memory of silence still haunts your dreams? Now steady your aim. Let the glow of your screen be your scope, and crawl with me into the hush where a single shot decides a fate. The trenches. They were the defining feature of the front lines in so many conflicts, particularly the brutal static warfare of World War I. A landscape utterly transformed, carved out by fear, desperation, and the relentless, grinding logic of survival. Imagine miles upon miles of these man-made canyons, snaking across the land like horrific, open wounds. They were places of unimaginable noise. The concussive, earth-shattering blasts of artillery barrages that could shake the ground beneath your feet. The frantic, mechanical chatter of machine guns laying down curtains of fire. The terrified shouts of men charging into impossible odds. The agonizing cries of the wounded, echoing in the damp earth. Yes, the trenches were loud, a constant, overwhelming assault on the senses. But for one particular type of soldier, the man whose life was measured through the narrow lens of a scope, the dominant sound was often something else entirely. It was the absence of sound, a deadly, heavy, unnerving quiet that felt profoundly unnatural. This wasn't the peaceful silence of a quiet room, or the natural hush of a forest on a calm day. This was an enforced silence. A silence born not of peace, but of absolute, gripping terror. Because in this world, any sound you made, any movement you executed, any presence you inadvertently revealed could instantly, irrevocably mean your death. The mud wasn't just mud. It was a heavy, suffocating cloak that seemed to try and swallow you whole. The smells weren't just damp earth and rain. It was a sickening cocktail of stale gunpowder, acrid smoke, the pungent odor of stale sweat, the metallic tang of fear, and something else, something fouler, the pervasive, sickly sweet smell of decay, of death. And beneath it all, hanging heavy in the air, coating everything like a fine dust, the constant, crushing blanket of dread. While the average infantryman might huddle with his comrades, waiting for the dreaded order to advance, preparing for a charge over open ground, or enduring the terror of a bombardment, the sniper's war was fought on a fundamentally different plane. It wasn't about mass movement or collective action. It was a war of supreme patience, of absolute, unwavering stillness. They didn't scream orders to a squad. They didn't yell battle cries as they ran forward. They waited, silent, deadly, almost perfectly hidden. Their primary weapon wasn't just the high-powered rifle they carried. It was their uncanny ability to melt into the landscape, to become indistinguishable from the earth itself. In this unique, terrifying reality, every single action carried an immense, potentially lethal weight. A boot placed slightly wrong, snapping a fragile branch hidden beneath the mud. A helmet accidentally scraping against the trench wall. a shadow falling in a way that seemed unnatural. These weren't just minor slips. Any one of these tiny actions could be the signal the enemy was waiting for. Not just to alert them to a general presence, but to pinpoint you, to invite a targeted, precise, and lethal response aimed directly at your hidden position. The regular infantrymen faced the terrifying chaos of indiscriminate fire, bullets and shrapnel raining down everywhere. But the sniper faced a different kind of threat. The chilling certainty of a single, precise shot, aimed with deadly intent, solely at them. In this hyper-alert, deadly environment, natural instincts were completely rewired. The primal, human urge to move, to stretch cramped muscles, to fidget, or worst of all, to peer over the protective wall of the trench or hiding spot. This became a suicidal impulse. The smallest act of curiosity, the briefest, most innocent desire to simply see what was happening beyond the immediate confines of your safety, was transformed into a gamble with the highest possible stakes. Life or death. There's an old, grim saying born directly from this brutal reality, whispered between those who understood its truth. You don't always die from bullets fired blindly. Sometimes, you die from curiosity. You die from the fraction of a second you exposed yourself. You die from that irresistible, human urge to look, to know, to break the agonizing, monotonous tension of waiting. The sniper understood this terrifying truth on a cellular level. Their very survival depended on absolute, unwavering discipline, on fighting the most basic primal urges, the urge to move, to be seen, to interact with the world outside their tiny, hidden bubble. They learned to measure their lives not in the conventional units of hours or days, but in breaths held in their lungs, in muscle twitches suppressed with sheer willpower, in the agonizing, life-saving act of remaining perfectly, utterly still. This oppressive silence wasn't just a condition they endured. It was their battlefield, their most vital weapon, and their constant, terrifying companion. In the silent war of the sniper, disappearing wasn't merely a useful skill. It was the absolute, non-negotiable foundation of their existence. To be effective, to be lethal, you had to be invisible. To survive, you had to utterly cease being a discernible human form against the landscape. This demanded not just exceptional skill with a rifle, although that was certainly vital, but also a profound mastery over deception, illusion, and the very environment around you. Camouflage wasn't just a matter of wearing some greenish-brown cloth. It was an intricate art form, a precise science, and a relentless psychological battle waged against the enemy's eyes, against their ability to perceive and recognize the human shape. The methods employed were as varied and ingenious as the terrain itself and the limited resources available. In wooded areas, concealment was about seamless blending with the foliage, using local leaves, branches, and bark patterns to break up the human outline. In open fields, where cover was scarce, or amidst the chaotic rubble of destroyed buildings, it was about mimicking contours, textures, and colors, becoming indistinguishable from piles of debris, weathered stone, or patches of disturbed earth. Often, this involved the creation and painstaking maintenance of what became known as ghillie suits. These were garments covered in countless strips of fabric, burlap, or netting. But the real magic, the true effectiveness, came from adding local, natural materials directly onto the suit and into the sniper's position. A dedicated sniper might spend hours before settling into a hide, carefully weaving local leaves, grasses, twigs, and dirt into their suit and their immediate surroundings. Every detail mattered, ensuring the colors matched perfectly, and crucially, ensuring they blended seamlessly with the way the light and shadow fell at that specific location, at that specific time of day. But the true masters of concealment went far beyond simple pattern matching. They possessed an intuitive, almost instinctual understanding of how the human eye perceives shapes, how it registers movement, and how it reacts to contrast. It meant meticulously eliminating any hard lines that scream human. It meant softening edges, breaking up recognizable forms, and creating irregular, natural-looking shapes that fooled the searching gaze. It meant becoming a diligent student of light and shadow, observing how they changed throughout the day, how they stretched and shifted, and using them to their advantage. A master sniper had to be as skilled in the science of optics and perception as they were in ballistics. Some hiding spots were relatively conventional, offering natural advantages. A natural depression in the earth that offered a low profile. A dense thicket of bushes that provided ready-made cover. Or purpose-built sniper holes, positions deliberately dug and carefully concealed, often reinforced to prevent collapse and painstakingly hidden from views above and from the sides. A typical sniper hole might be just large enough for one person, perhaps around 3 feet wide by 6 feet long, and deep enough, 4 to 5 feet, to offer substantial protection. It would feature a carefully constructed firing slit, often barely wide enough for the rifle barrel, disguised with natural materials to blend seamlessly with the surroundings. These required backbreaking, painstaking work to dig, often under the cloak of darkness, with every single trace of excavated earth meticulously removed and scattered elsewhere to leave no telltale sign of disturbance. But the brutal demands of the battlefield, coupled with desperate ingenuity, often led to far more extreme and disturbing measures. Hiding inside hollow logs, for instance. If a fallen tree was large enough, a sniper might laboriously hollow it out, creating a tiny, claustrophobic hide, barely large enough to lie or crouch within, with only a small, disguised firing port. The physical discomfort and mental strain of such a position would be immense. And then, there was the grim, horrifying reality of hiding amongst the dead. While profoundly disturbing on a human level, it was a chillingly effective form of concealment on a battlefield tragically littered with casualties. Becoming part of the carnage, lying still amongst the fallen, was a horrifying camouflage tactic born of sheer, desperate necessity. It effectively erased the sniper's living presence amidst the grim landscape of death. This tactic, perhaps more than any other, highlights the extreme lengths, the moral compromises and psychological costs, forced upon these individuals by the brutal, silent demands of their unique war. Concealment wasn't just about staying hidden. It was about blurring the line between the living and the dead to survive. But concealment wasn't a purely passive activity for the sniper. It was also a crucial component in a deadly, high-stakes game of deception played out across the blasted terrain of no man's land. Snipers weren't just trying to stay hidden from enemy soldiers, or even just from enemy snipers. They were actively trying to lure the enemy out, to trick them into revealing their own positions. One of the most common tactics involved the use of decoys. Simple, yet often terrifyingly effective tools of psychological warfare. A helmet placed on a stick, carefully raised just high enough above the parapet or cover to look like a soldier peering out. A piece of uniform draped over a mound of earth to mimic a hunched figure. Or perhaps the most infamous, the dummy head. These were often crude figures made of wax or clay, sometimes painted to look realistic, sometimes even fitted with crude, articulated necks so they could be moved slightly. And in the darkest, most disturbing accounts, whispered rumors spoke of using actual heads, severed from fallen soldiers, a grim detail highlighting the utter dehumanization of this conflict. These decoys were bait, pure and simple. The hope was that an enemy sniper, constantly scanning for targets, would see this tempting, seemingly careless exposure and take the shot. If they did, they would inadvertently reveal their own position in several ways. The flash of the muzzle report, brief but potentially visible. The crack of the rifle shot, the sound carrying across the battlefield. Or the trajectory of the bullet, seen impacting the dummy, the defending sniper, who was perfectly concealed and waiting with infinite patience. Could then use that brief moment of revelation to attempt a countershot, a deadly strike against the now exposed enemy. It was a high-stakes poker game, played with lives instead of chips. A terrifying duel of wits where one side was risking little more than a piece of wood, wax, and cloth, while the other was risking their life with every pull of the trigger. The enemy's ammunition, their reaction to the bait, became their tell. Of course, the sniper on the other side wasn't idle. They also had to be masters of deception, but equally, masters of seeing through deception. Spotting an enemy sniper was rarely as simple as seeing the full outline of a person standing out against the background. It was a skill that relied on recognizing the most subtle, almost imperceptible clues. The tiny, fleeting glint of a scope lens catching the sunlight. A shadow that seemed unnaturally deep, too sharp, or in the wrong place. A slight disturbance in the vegetation that didn't match the natural sway of the wind. The almost invisible puff of dust or displaced snow, kicked up by a muzzle blast hundreds of yards away. Or the faint, chilling, almost inaudible whisper of a bullet passing dangerously close by, indicating a shooter nearby. It was about spotting mistakes. The enemy sniper's slightest error in concealment, the tiniest lapse in their absolute stillness, the most minuscule movement. That was the opportunity the waiting sniper was searching for. This constant, nerve-wracking dance of concealment, deception, and detection turned the battlefield into a vast, deadly chessboard. A relentless game of cat and mouse, played out over acres of mud, wire, and death. Except, in this twisted version of the game, the mouse wasn't defenseless. The mouse was also heavily armed, and was often just as skilled, just as patient, and just as deadly as the cat. Both were masters of disguise, waiting, watching, enduring, for the other to blink first, to make that single, fatal error that would cost them everything. Patience in warfare is more than just a virtue. It's a strategic necessity. But for the sniper, patience wasn't just a part of the job description. It was their very existence. Their war was fought in minutes that stretched into hours, and hours that bled interminably into days. All of it. Every second of discomfort, every suppressed breath, every aching muscle fiber, endured for the possibility of a single, fleeting opportunity, a single target, a single shot. The stories, some legendary, all grimly true, recount snipers waiting for incredible lengths of time, 12 hours, 14 hours, sometimes even longer, enduring unimaginable physical discomfort and mental strain, all for one specific, often fleeting target. Imagine lying absolutely still, crammed into a tiny, often damp, often freezing cold or scorching hot hide, your muscles screaming in protest, your limbs growing numb, the circulation slowing, your eyes burning, watering, aching from the constant, intense focus required to stare through the scope, scanning the same small patch of ground for hours on end. Your world shrinks, reduces itself entirely to the narrow, magnified field of view within that optical sight. Everything outside that tiny circle ceases to exist. Nothing else matters. The target might not be a high-ranking officer whose removal could change the course of a battle. It might not even be a machine gunner pinning down a company. It might be just a soldier, someone simply walking a predictable route between trenches. Or, as the grim tales chillingly recount, someone making a single, seemingly trivial mistake, like a soldier wearing his helmet slightly crooked, creating an unusual silhouette, or taking the exact same path to the latrine at the exact same time every single morning, or briefly silhouetting himself against the skyline for just a second while adjusting a piece of equipment. These seemingly insignificant, utterly mundane actions, when observed over hours, sometimes days, of patient, relentless surveillance, became fatal habits. They became the opportunities the sniper waited for. This waiting wasn't passive. It was an intensely active form of combat waged against your own body, against your most basic human needs and instincts. How do you eat? You don't unpack rations and chew loudly. Often, it's through a tube, consuming bland, liquid rations designed to minimize any chewing or swallowing sounds, and crucially, to minimize waste. How do you answer nature's call after hours of lying still? Maybe having consumed that liquid ration. Do not move. You use makeshift solutions, anything to avoid breaking your absolute stillness and revealing your position. A bottle, a bag, whatever is available. The indignity, the physical strain, the sheer unpleasantness of this aspect of the wait is immense, debilitating. Your fingers, exposed to the biting cold or just immobile for far too long, grow numb, losing all sensation. Your muscles lock up, protesting the unnatural stillness, screaming for release, for movement, for just a simple stretch. Every fiber of your being cries out for relief, to move, to stand up, to scream. But you can't. You absolutely cannot. The penalty for breaking that stillness isn't just discomfort. It's instant death. Not just for you, but potentially for your comrades. If your revealed position draws fire or compromises the defensive line. The mental battle is just as fierce, perhaps even more so, than the physical one, fighting off the crushing boredom of endless waiting, maintaining absolute, pinpoint focus for hour after hour, suppressing the uncontrollable urge to fidget, to cough that tickle in your throat, to stifle a sneeze, even to scratch an almost unbearable itch that feels like 1,000 ants crawling on your skin. Your own mind can become your worst enemy, conjuring doubts, magnifying fears, even spawning hallucinations born of extreme fatigue, isolation, and sensory deprivation. Staying alert, staying patient, staying disciplined, minute after minute, hour after hour. It requires an extraordinary, almost superhuman level of mental fortitude. And all the while, your eyes are glued to the scope, scanning, waiting, observing, learning the enemy's routines, their predictable habits, their vulnerabilities. You become intimately, terrifyingly familiar with a tiny patch of ground hundreds of yards away, noticing every change in texture, every displacement of a stone, every subtle detail. You are the ultimate predator, observing its prey with an unnerving, almost terrifying intensity. There's a chilling quote often associated with this kind of psychological warfare, sometimes attributed to Soviet snipers on the Eastern Front. You don't have to kill anyone, just let them know you're watching. The sheer presence of a sniper, even if undetected, was a potent weapon of fear, sowing paranoia and disrupting enemy movement. But sometimes, the goal wasn't just deterrence. It was a specific target, a specific, lethal shot. And after hours, sometimes days, of agonizing stillness, after fighting every physical protest, every mental distraction, every screaming urge to move, the moment might finally arrive. The target appears. The crosshairs settle, steady and precise. The decision is made in a fraction of a second. The culmination of all those hours of waiting, of enduring. The patience finally pays off. But the true cost, both seen and unseen, felt by both the victim and the sniper, is only just beginning to be tallied. The culmination of hours, sometimes days, of agonizing, bone-weary patience is reduced to a single, explosive event. A pull of the trigger, the sharp crack of the rifle shot, and then silence. An utter, profound, heavy silence descends in the sniper's immediate world. There are no cheers in the trench nearby, no backslapping among comrades, no triumphant shouts of victory echoing across no man's land. Just a body falling, often far away, hundreds of yards distant, unnoticed by most of the soldiers in the trenches, certainly uncelebrated in any conventional sense. For the infantryman who survives a desperate charge across open ground, or who fights house to house to take an enemy position, there are moments of shared relief, of grim camaraderie, even if fleeting, desperate triumph felt collectively. Their actions are visible. Their impact is immediate and often a shared experience. But the sniper's kill is a fundamentally solitary act, witnessed only by the sniper themselves, by the victim at the terrible end of the bullet's path, and perhaps, distantly, by an enemy who now knows, with chilling certainty, that somewhere out there, death is watching, specifically for them. There is no applause for the perfect shot, perfectly aimed after hours of waiting. No medal ceremony is being planned in the rear. The sniper doesn't emerge from their muddy, cramped hide to be hailed as a hero by cheering crowds. Often, their actions, their kills, their very presence, are deliberately kept secret even from soldiers in their own unit, necessary for maintaining operational security and the element of surprise. Their triumphs, if such a grim term can even be used, are silent, invisible, and felt only in the deepest, most internal corners of their being. In fact, snipers were often viewed with a complex, unsettling mix of emotions by their own comrades. There was awe, certainly, born of respect for their lethal skill, their almost supernatural patience, and the sheer guts required to operate alone in such terrifying isolation. There was fear, Masu, too, and often resentment. Fear, because a sniper's presence, whether friendly or enemy, acted like a magnet for danger. Their kills could provoke swift, brutal retaliatory artillery strikes or intense bursts of machine gun fire, or worse, significantly increased activity from enemy snipers, all of which put everyone else in the trenches at risk. And there was often a quiet, simmering resentment. They were different. They didn't participate in the mass charges, the shared collective suffering, the intense bonding that occurred among men enduring the chaotic, communal horror of the front-line trench together. They operated outside the conventional unit structure, solitary figures performing a chillingly precise, almost clinical task, while others were experiencing a more desperate, face-to-face, often messy form of violence. They were seen as separate, detached, performing a kind of killing that felt fundamentally different, perhaps colder, than the brutal, necessary violence of close combat. This detachment, this perceived separation, coupled with the act itself, came at a profound, devastating psychological price. There's a brutal, simple equation that governs the sniper's internal war. One kill equals one psychological scar. It's a burden added, layer upon layer, to the soul. Every single life taken, seen clearly through the magnified view of the scope, registered not simply as a strategic victory, a point scored in a game, but as a heavy, accumulating weight. Unlike the rapid, often impersonal nature of violence delivered by machine gun fire, where individual targets are often blurred into a mass, or artillery shells falling miles away, the sniper's kill was intensely, undeniably personal. They selected the individual target. They watched them, sometimes for hours, learning their habits, before making the conscious decision and taking the shot. They saw the life drain away, the body fall. This level of direct, intentional killing, repeated over time, etched itself deep onto the psyche. Every shot fired, every human life ended by their hand, added another layer of psychological damage. These weren't just events that happened. They were wounds inflicted upon the self. The sniper carried these scars alone, hidden away, just like their positions. There were no shared war stories about specific kills around the campfire, no boasting in the mess tent, just the quiet, internal accounting of the terrible, mounting cost. So, the shot rings out. Or perhaps it's just a muffled thud. A life ends. And in the sniper's hidden world, there is only the immediate, urgent need to melt back into invisibility, to return to the agonizing stillness and the growing, unbearable weight of another psychological scar. Their war was fought alone, and its grim victories were silent, invisible, and profoundly costly to the soul. Staring through a high-powered scope performs a strange, terrible alchemy on the world. The vast chaos of the battlefield, the noise, the fear, the shared experience, it all falls away, reduced to a single, crystal-clear image framed within the narrow circle of the optic sight. A human being, perhaps just going about their life, performing some mundane task, utterly unaware that they are being observed, assessed, targeted. In that confined circle of vision, perhaps just a few inches across in their world, the sniper holds absolute, terrifying power over another person's existence. For a fleeting, terrifying second, in that moment of absolute control, it could feel divine, to possess that ultimate authority, to be the unseen arbiter of life and death. With the power to end an entire world, that person's world, with the slightest pressure of a finger. It's a feeling of intense, singular power. A chilling inversion of the helplessness felt by so many soldiers caught in the face of mass destruction. Here, the action is personal, precise, and feels entirely within your hands. But that second, that dangerous, illusory flicker of godlike power, is just that, a second, a brief, terrible illusion. Because the reality of the sniper's kill is anything but divine. It is brutal, final, and leaves behind a devastating, invisible psychological wake. The moment the trigger is pulled, the brief, intense surge of power is immediately replaced by the crushing weight of what has just occurred. The nightmares come later, or sometimes, chillingly. They begin immediately, haunting the quiet hours in the hide. The image seen through the scope, the life extinguished by your hand, replays itself endlessly in the mind's eye. Sleep offers no escape. It merely provides a new, terrifying theater for the same horror. The faces of the fallen, seen in their final moments, haunt the darkness. The guilt follows. A heavy, suffocating shroud that no amount of rationalization, no amount of telling yourself it was my duty or it was necessary, can entirely lift. Every kill, every single scar mentioned earlier, contributes to this terrible burden. You were trained to do this. You were ordered to do this. You were told it was a vital part of the war effort. But the direct, intensely personal nature of the act makes it almost impossible to compartmentalize, to distance yourself from the devastating human cost. You saw them. You aimed. You ended their life, that connection, however brief or distant in physical space, is undeniable, indelible. And then there is the look, the unmistakable, chilling 1,000-yard stare, the vacant, unfocused gaze of someone who has simply seen too much, done too much. It's the look of a mind struggling, often failing, to process the cumulative trauma, the unbearable weight of all those lives taken, all those moments of absolute power followed by overwhelming horror and emptiness. It's a look that separates them, visibly or invisibly, from those who haven't carried that specific, terrible burden. For some snipers, this psychological toll, this accumulating weight, became simply too much to bear. The stories recount instances where a sniper quit, where they simply could not pull the trigger, after seeing the victim's eyes just before taking the shot. This single, seemingly small detail captures the chilling intimacy of the sniper's kill. Unlike a pilot dropping bombs from high above, or an artilleryman firing shells miles away, the sniper often had a clear, magnified, intensely personal view of their target, right up to the final, fatal second. To see that flicker of life, to witness the human expression, the simple, undeniable act of being alive in the eyes of the person you are about to kill, that could be the breaking point. That split second of recognition, of human connection, could shatter the necessary detachment, humanize the target in a way that was simply unbearable. It could transform the act of killing from a military task into an unbearable personal violation, not just of the victim's life, but of the sniper's own fragile humanity. These were the moments when the cold line between military duty and basic humanity blurred and dissolved. When the sheer weight of the act, of all the prior acts, became too heavy to lift the finger. Quitting, however it manifested, refusing to shoot, requesting reassignment away from the front, or breaking down entirely in the hide, was an acknowledgement that the price of that perceived power was far too high, the psychological cost too devastating for the soul to bear. The sniper's crosshairs offered a brief, terrible taste of ultimate, singular power. But the true, lingering experience was not one of divinity or triumph, but of crushing isolation, pervasive guilt, and profound, invisible psychological wounding. The view through the scope revealed not just a target, but the horrifying reflection of the killer's own deteriorating soul, piece by piece. If the sniper was the hunter, the unseen predator lurking in the shadows, they were also simultaneously and relentlessly the most pursued prey on the entire battlefield. Their lethal effectiveness, their ability to strike seemingly at will from nowhere, made them incredibly high-value targets, figures whose elimination was a priority, sometimes the priority. For the enemy command, a single, skilled sniper, operating in a key sector, could effectively paralyze enemy movement. They could make roads impassable for supply wagons, turn routine resupply missions into deadly sprints, and make even basic, necessary activities like repairing barbed wire or digging trenches suicidal endeavors. Because they instilled such deep, pervasive fear, because they disrupted the enemy's ability to operate openly and safely, snipers drew a disproportionate amount of attention and resources. They weren't just a threat to individual soldiers. They were a strategic problem that needed to be solved, often violently, often immediately. Who hunted the sniper? Almost everyone. Artillery was a constant, terrifying threat. If a sniper's general location was suspected, even just a vague area, the enemy might not bother trying to pinpoint them precisely. They might simply blanket the entire area with shells, hoping to get lucky, hoping that sheer brute force would eliminate the threat. An artillery barrage was indiscriminate, devastatingly terrifying, and incredibly difficult to survive for a soldier confined to a concealed, static position like a sniper hide. A direct hit would instantly vaporize the hide and everything in it. Even near misses could collapse dugouts, bury the sniper alive, or inflict lethal wounds through concussive blast and shrapnel. Rival snipers, of course, were the most direct and specialized threat. This was the ultimate duel, a silent, deadly contest played out at extreme range between two masters of concealment and marksmanship. They hunted each other with relentless focus, searching for the slightest mistake, the briefest glint of a scope lens, the telltale puff of dust, the most subtle hint of displaced earth. It was a mirror match where the smallest error, the slightest lapse in patience or concealment, meant instant, often unseen, death. Infantry soldiers were also a significant danger. While less specialized in marksmanship at extreme range, a frustrated, terrified, vengeful infantry unit, pinned down or suffering casualties from a sniper they couldn't locate, might be ordered to conduct a painstaking sweep of the suspected area. This could involve hours of dangerous searching, sometimes crawling over open ground, through dense thickets, or maneuvering through shattered buildings, driven by a desperate, visceral desire to eliminate the source of their fear and vulnerability. And in some conflicts, particularly those fought in or near populated areas, civilians could tragically become part of the threat, driven by ideology, by overwhelming fear, by desperation, or simply coerced by occupying forces. Locals might report suspected sniper positions, or even be forced to actively participate in searching for them. The sniper, often operating outside the conventional front lines, hidden among houses or fields, was sometimes seen by occupied populations not as a soldier, but as a dangerous invader or terrorist, further isolating them and expanding the list of those who wanted them gone. The more effective a sniper was, the greater the threat they posed to the enemy's operations, and consequently, the more intense and determined the hunt for them became. If you made the enemy so afraid that they wouldn't dare raise their heads, wouldn't risk moving supplies openly, wouldn't even feel safe sitting in their own trenches, they would expend enormous effort, dedicate significant resources to find you. They would crawl through mud, risk crossing barbed wire, navigate minefields, anything to silence the unseen rifle that held them captive in their own lines. There was no real safety for the sniper. Their carefully crafted hide offered concealment, their shield against discovery, but it also severely limited their mobility. Retreating quickly under sudden, intense fire was often impossible. They were committed to their position until their mission was complete. They were ordered to withdraw, or they were discovered. Every day in sniper hell was a relentless test of skill, of patience, of nerve, and ultimately of sheer, brutal luck. Avoiding the enemy's probing patrols, recognizing the subtle signs of a sweep, spotting the rival sniper before they spotted you, understanding when to hold fire and when to take the terrifying gamble of a countershot. The silent killer was constantly, acutely aware that they were also the most wanted man, the most sought-after prey on the battlefield. Pursued relentlessly by a host of enemies, determined to end their deadly watch. The decision to fire a countershot was the ultimate gamble. To shoot was to shatter the illusion of invisibility, to loudly proclaim, "I am here." It instantly transformed the sniper from the unseen predator into a pinpoint target. The moment the rifle cracked, their carefully maintained invisibility was shattered, even if only for a second. They risked drawing immediate, concentrated fire from the enemy sniper they just shot at, from nearby infantry, from machine gunners, or even devastating artillery. The silence and stillness that were their shield were sacrificed the moment the trigger was pulled in that desperate, deadly counter-sniping duel. The choice was often remain silent and risk being found, or reveal yourself and risk being instantly destroyed. Eventually, for many, the war ends. The guns fall silent across the front lines. Soldiers begin the long, often difficult journey home, many carrying visible physical wounds, but almost all carrying invisible scars etched onto their minds and souls. But for the sniper, the transition back to civilian life was often uniquely challenging. A return to a world that simply didn't understand, and perhaps didn't want to understand, what they had become. For many, there were no parades acknowledging their specific contribution. No cheering crowds lined the streets solely for them. No medals were easily given for the solitary, hidden kills they performed, while other combat roles were understood, often celebrated. In public narratives, the brave charge, the desperate defense of a position, the dogfight in the sky. The sniper's war was too quiet, too personal, too unsettling for public recognition. Their kills were hidden, their methods sometimes seen as cold, clinical, or even unsporting by those who hadn't lived the brutal reality of the trenches, who hadn't understood the sheer necessity of their work. Their stories, even if they could find the words, even if they dared to speak them, were often met not with understanding or gratitude, but with silence, discomfort, or even revulsion. Who in a quiet town wanted to hear about lying in the mud for hours, waiting to kill a single, unsuspecting man seen clearly through a scope? Who wanted to hear about the chilling intimacy of that view, about the devastating psychological scars left by watching life extinguished at your hand? These were not heroic tales of valor in the face of overwhelming odds. They were quiet, disturbing accounts of precision death delivered from the shadows. The intense detachment required to be an effective sniper, the learned ability to dehumanize the target in the moment, to focus solely on the task of the kill, to suppress empathy, was a necessary, vital survival mechanism in the war zone. But it was this very quality that made reintegration into civilian society almost impossible for some. The hypervigilance that saved their life in the trenches. The ingrained habit of scanning every crowd, every street, for potential threats. The profound difficulty connecting emotionally after the necessary psychological numbing of combat. These were often amplified for the sniper, whose role demanded a unique level of emotional suppression. There's a chilling quote, often used to describe the profound and irreversible changes that war inflicts upon the human psyche. But it resonates with particular force for the sniper. You weren't a murderer, but you weren't quite human anymore, either. The war, their specific war, had fundamentally altered them. The razor-thin line between predator and person had blurred, perhaps irrevocably. They had performed acts that civilian society could barely conceive of, in circumstances that stripped away conventional morality, leaving them with a unique, heavy burden. They carried the immense weight of their kills, the constant, haunting memory of those final moments seen through the scope, the gnawing guilt, the recurring nightmares. This burden was compounded by the intense isolation of their role during the war and the subsequent inability to share their experiences, to process them collectively. While infantrymen could bond over shared trauma, collective memories, and mutual support, the sniper's trauma was intensely personal, solitary, and largely inexpressible to outsiders. Finding meaning, finding purpose, finding a place in a world that no longer demanded their unique, deadly skills, that no longer required absolute stillness and lethal precision, was an immense challenge. The stillness that saved them in the claustrophobic confines of the trenches made them restless, alienated, and uncomfortable in the mundane routines of peace. The intense focus that was their greatest strength in the scope became an inability to connect with the softer, less defined reality of everyday life. The specific skills that made them invaluable in war, endless patience, microscopic observation, deadly precision, the uncanny ability to disappear, were either useless or actively detrimental in peacetime. How do you explain the psychological scars left by waiting hours to take one life to someone who has never known such a world? Such a terrible necessity. The sniper's war didn't truly end when the fighting stopped. It continued in the quiet. Internal battles fought within their own minds, in their struggle to reconnect with a humanity that felt irrevocably altered. They were the silent killers of the battlefield. And their silence, their isolation, and the heavy, terrible weight of their knowledge often followed them. A lingering shadow, long after they left sniper hell. They are the ghosts of the battlefield. Whispers on the wind, a glint of glass in the distance. Or nothing at all. Just the unsettling feeling of being watched. They are the shadows unseen, unheard. Until the impossible shot rings out, a single, devastating punctuation mark in the chaotic symphony of war. They operate in a world defined by extremes chilling, almost unbearable patience measured in hours. Sometimes days, profound, absolute solitude. And then, a split-second explosion of calculated, deadly violence. They are the elite snipers, not just soldiers who shoot well, but masters of concealment, observation, and lethal precision. Individuals whose skill, nerve, and unwavering focus have shaped the course of battles, altered strategies, and etched their names into the grim, often controversial, history of warfare. Their impact far outweighs their numbers. They carry not just a rifle, honed for devastating accuracy at incredible distances, but the crushing weight of isolation, the constant, nerve-wracking tension of the stalk, and the profound moral burden of taking a life from hundreds or thousands of yards away. In this journey, we will pull back the veil on this clandestine world. We will explore the evolution of their deadly craft. From the muddy, brutal trenches of World War I to the complex urban labyrinths and vast, open deserts of today, we will meet the legendary figures whose deeds became legend, men whose names are synonymous with the art of the long shot. We will delve into the extraordinary, often misunderstood, mindset required to endure the unbearable tension and isolation of their mission. We will understand their devastating, asymmetric impact on the battlefield, the relentless technological arms race that fuels their ever-increasing precision, the brutal, transformative training that forges their capabilities, and the enduring legacy that continues to define modern warfare. Prepare to enter the world of the elite sniper. For centuries, armies have recognized and valued skilled marksmen, individuals with a natural talent for shooting, who could pick off targets at ranges beyond the average soldier's capability, were always useful assets. Think of the frontiersmen with their Kentucky rifles during the American Revolution, or the skilled skirmishers in the armies of Europe, but these were often soldiers who happened to be good shots, integrated into standard units without specific, specialized training or equipment for long-range precision work. They were valuable, certainly, but not yet the dedicated, tactical sniper. As we understand the role today, individuals like Timothy Murphy, a rifleman from the frontiers serving with the Continental Army during the American Revolution, demonstrated the potential of precision fire. At the pivotal Battle of Saratoga in 1777, legend holds that Murphy made a crucial long-range shot, potentially killing British General Simon Fraser from a considerable distance, perhaps around 300 yards. A remarkable feat with the muzzle-loading flintlock rifles of the time. This kind of shot, specifically targeting a high-value individual from afar to disrupt command, hinted at what specialized marksmanship could achieve, but it was an isolated incident driven by individual skill, not a systematic tactical doctrine. The very term sniper itself offers a curious clue to its origins, one rooted more in sport than in warfare initially. It traces back to 18th century British India. The snipe was a small, notoriously difficult to hunt wading bird known for its incredibly erratic, unpredictable flight patterns. Successfully hitting a snipe on the wing required immense skill, quick reflexes, and precise shooting under challenging conditions. Hence, a hunter good enough to consistently hit snipes was dubbed a sniper. It was a term denoting exceptional marksmanship against a particularly challenging target, a mark of skill recognized among hunters. But the modern concept of the military sniper, a highly specialized soldier dedicated specifically to precision target engagement from concealment, often over long distances, with a focus on observation and intelligence gathering. That concept truly took hold and evolved dramatically in the crucible of large-scale, static warfare. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw significant advancements in military technology, particularly the widespread adoption of smokeless powder, which produced less revealing muzzle smoke than older black powder, and the development of more accurate, reliable breech-loading rifles with improved sights. These technological shifts set the stage. However, it was the brutal, unique, and static conditions of early 20th century conflict that solidified the sniper's indispensable tactical role. Before World War I erupted in 1914, dedicated, organized sniper units were exceedingly rare in most armies. Marksmanship was valued, and some units designated specific soldiers as sharpshooters. But the idea of training soldiers solely for sniping, equipping them specifically for it with specialized rifles and optics, and employing them as a pervasive, distinct tactical asset across the front lines, was not yet standard doctrine. Armies had soldiers who were good shots, certainly, but the specialized sniper, as a constant, terrifying component of trench warfare, was yet to emerge fully. The sheer, static, bloody horror of the Western Front changed everything. World War I quickly devolved into a grinding war of attrition, fought from miles upon miles of intricately dug-in trenches, zigzagging across the landscape of Europe. The front lines were often incredibly close, sometimes just a few hundred yards apart, occasionally even less, separated by a churned-up, devastated, corpse-strewn wasteland known grimly as No Man's Land. Crossing that space in a massed infantry assault against entrenched machine guns, artillery barrages, and rapid rifle fire from protected positions was, more often than not, a suicidal endeavor resulting in horrific casualties for minimal gain. In this grim, unchanging, claustrophobic environment, where grand maneuvers ground to a halt and conventional assaults proved futile and costly, individual actions, small unit tactics, and the ability to inflict casualties with precision took on an outsized importance. Commanders and soldiers alike sought ways to gain an advantage, to chip away at the enemy, to make their lives in the opposing trenches even more miserable, dangerous, and untenable. And that's where the dedicated sniper found their essential, terrifying niche. A single, skilled sniper, operating from a cleverly concealed position within the tangled wire, a shell crater, a forward listening post, or a purpose-built firing slot in the trench wall, could terrorize an entire section of enemy trench line. They could pin down troops, preventing essential movement for resupply. Reconnaissance patrols, the construction of defenses, or even basic relief rotations, they could pick off soldiers attempting repairs to barbed wire, observation from parapets, or communication between positions. Their unseen presence instilled a pervasive, gnawing fear, a constant tension that sapped morale and made the trench into a perpetual, nerve-wracking trap. The enemy soldier was no longer just an anonymous figure in a far-off trench line. Through the limited magnification of the scope, they became a specific, vulnerable target. The psychological impact of knowing an unseen eye was watching, waiting patiently for a careless mistake before delivering lethal precision, was immense and fundamentally changed behavior on the front lines. The technology available to these pioneering snipers was still relatively rudimentary by today's standards. Early telescopic sights were often adaptations of commercial hunting scopes, sometimes pressed into military service out of necessity. They could be fragile, easily damaged by the rough handling and harsh conditions of the trench environment, and were often difficult to keep reliably zeroed, meaning the point of impact didn't consistently match the aiming point. Magnification was typically low, perhaps just 2x or 3x power, offering only a marginal advantage over the rifle's iron sights for detailed target identification or long-range precision shooting. Sometimes they were even mounted slightly off-center on the rifle to prevent the scope from interfering with the rifle's top loading mechanism, adding another layer of complexity to aiming. Rifles used for sniping were often standard-issue infantry weapons. The British Lee Enfield, the German Mauser, the American Springfield, sometimes selected from the factory for their perceived inherent accuracy. These rifles were then fitted with these basic scopes. Understanding ballistics was primarily conceptual. Without sophisticated tools, judging distance across no man's land, accounting for bullet drop over range, and compensating for wind drift required immense experience, intuition, and calculation based on observable factors like dust kicked up by the wind near the target or the faint sound of the bullet's flight. It was an art as much as a science, relying heavily on the individual shooter's feel for their rifle and the environment. But it was in this brutal environment that the craft of sniping, the fundamental principles that still guide snipers today, truly began to be defined and refined. The importance of concealment wasn't just about hiding. It was about becoming an invisible part of the landscape itself. Snipers learned to blend perfectly with their immediate surroundings, using mud smeared on their uniforms, grass, leaves, burlap salvaged from sandbags, whatever was at hand, to seemingly disappear into the tangled wire, shell-pocked earth, and shattered debris of no man's land. They learned to use the natural folds in the ground, shell craters, and carefully constructed firing ports within the trench parapet. Patience, a cornerstone of the sniper's discipline that would become almost legendary, was measured not in minutes or even hours, but in days. They would lie motionless in their hides, enduring discomfort, cold, or searing heat, waiting for the perfect shot opportunity, or simply waiting for an enemy soldier to make a careless mistake that revealed their position, like showing their head over the parapet for too long. This extreme patience was a survival necessity and a tactical advantage. This relentless threat posed by unseen snipers forced the enemy to adapt quickly, spurring the development of early counter-sniping tactics and technology. Soldiers developed methods to spot the telltale signs of a hidden sniper. Observation scopes, often made from periscopes adapted for trench warfare, allowed soldiers to scan no man's land and the opposing trench line without exposing their heads. They looked for muzzle flash, though smokeless powder reduced this, or the telltale puff of dust kicked up by the shot, or the glint of sun off a scope lens. Dummy heads, often crude representations made of papier-mâché or simple wood and wire, were placed atop trench parapets to deliberately draw fire, revealing the sniper's position by the location from which the shot originated. This led to a silent, deadly duel playing out constantly between the main lines of battle. A game of wits, patience, and observation, separate from but fundamentally influencing the larger conflict. The sniper of World War I wasn't just a soldier with a scoped rifle. They were pioneers defining a new, critical role in modern warfare. They had to master observation techniques in a chaotic, constantly surveyed environment, learn to build effective, long-term hide sites from limited materials, develop camouflage tailored specifically to the unique trench landscape, and refine their marksmanship under unimaginable physical and psychological pressure. They learned to read subtle wind cues by observing dust or vegetation, accurately judge distances using only their eyes and perhaps known landmarks or crude range estimation techniques, and understand the complex ballistics of their rifle and ammunition in variable, often miserable, environmental conditions. It was an art as much as a science, relying heavily on the individual shooter's feel for their rifle and the environment. The lessons hard learned in those muddy, claustrophobic, and lethal trenches. Lessons about patience, fieldcraft, observation, the psychological game, and the importance of teamwork with an observer, laid the foundational principles for every generation of snipers that followed. defining the core skills that would persist even as the nature of warfare underwent dramatic transformations in the decades to come. The techniques and principles forged in the static lines of World War I prove the tactical concept of the specialist sniper. But the nature of warfare changed dramatically after 1918. The grinding, fixed front lines gave way to far more dynamic. Mobile conflicts fought across continents. Armies moved rapidly across vast distances, fought in incredibly diverse terrain, and engaged in battles that shifted shape and location constantly. The core principles of sniping, concealment, observation, precision fire remained vital. But their application had to adapt significantly to these new, fluid environments and the new strategic demands of global war. World War II, erupting in 1939, presented a far more complex, widespread, and dynamic environment than its predecessor. While some instances of static lines and defensive positions reappeared, particularly towards the end of the war, the conflict as a whole was characterized by rapid armored thrusts, vast logistical distances, and campaigns fought across an astonishing variety of terrain and climates, from the freezing, sprawling, often open landscapes of the Eastern Front to the dense, humid jungles and beaches of the Pacific Islands, the arid deserts of North Africa, the mountainous regions of Italy, and the bombed-out ruins of Europe's ancient cities. Sniper tactics had to evolve to remain effective. Snipers were still indispensable assets, but their role expanded significantly beyond simply terrorizing trench lines. They were now disrupting enemy troop movements on open roads or across plains, eliminating officers and radio operators in rapidly developing battles to sow confusion, harassing logistics columns attempting to supply frontline troops, and providing critical, clandestine reconnaissance from forward positions deep within or overlooking enemy territory. Their targets became more diverse and often higher value, reflecting the wider, more mobile scope of the conflict. The emphasis shifted from simply inflicting casualties to achieving specific tactical and strategic effects. In the Pacific theater, the unique and brutal environmental conditions demanded a completely different kind of sniper expertise than the open fields of Europe. The dense, oppressive jungle environment severely limited visibility, often reducing effective engagement ranges to just a few hundred yards or even less. The intense heat, crushing humidity, and incredibly thick vegetation made movement difficult, loud, and exhausting. Here, snipers had to master movement and concealment in almost impenetrable terrain, using the natural foliage, the ferns, vines, bamboo, and deep shadows to become virtually invisible. Staying hidden meant not just blending in visually, but also managing sweat and scent in the tropical heat, and moving with extreme care to avoid making noise by breaking branches or rustling leaves. The Japanese military were formidable opponents, masters of using the terrain for defense and ambush, and they employed highly disciplined and effective snipers. These Japanese marksmen were known for their incredibly disciplined hiding techniques, sometimes digging cunningly concealed spider holes barely large enough for a man to hide in, or even tying themselves high up into the canopy of dense trees, making them incredibly difficult to locate and neutralize. Counter-sniping in the jungle became a deadly, painstaking game of searching for the minutest sign, a disturbance in the leaves, a glint of sun off unprotected equipment, a single shot traced back to its origin, the Eastern Front, the brutal titanic clash between Germany and the Soviet Union, saw sniping elevated to an almost iconic, even propagandized, status, particularly by the Soviet Union. Facing vast, open landscapes where cover was scarce and engagements could occur over immense distances, alternating with horrific, block-by-block urban fighting in cities like Stalingrad and Leningrad. snipers became celebrated national heroes. Their successful kills were heavily publicized in Soviet propaganda, inspiring countless other soldiers and citizens. And their individual duels with enemy snipers, like that between Vasily Zaitsev and the legendary German counter-sniper, were mythologized. The vast, open terrain of the Russian front forced snipers to refine lessons in using minimal natural cover. Understanding the significant effects of mirage on long shots across hot plains in summer or the challenges of operating in deep snow and brutal cold in winter. But the urban environments, like the ruins of Stalingrad, demanded a completely different skill set. Here, mastery of rubble, shattered buildings, shadows, and firing from unexpected angles, from high floors, basements, through small gaps in walls, or from concealed positions within destroyed structures, became paramount. Snipers had to be incredibly adaptable, equally deadly lying prone in a frozen field as they were hidden within the debris of a ruined factory or apartment building. Following World War II, conflicts continued to evolve. Though the sniper's role remained vital, the Korean War saw snipers utilized, particularly during the periods of static warfare along the 38th parallel, bringing back some of the trench warfare challenges of WWI, though with different technology and terrain. Then, the Vietnam War, starting in the 1960s, brought the sniper back into the dense jungle environment, but with new challenges posed by a different enemy and a different type of conflict: counterinsurgency and guerrilla warfare. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army were masters of using the environment, the dense jungle, the extensive tunnel systems, the unpredictable weather, to their immense advantage, making conventional tactics difficult. American snipers in Vietnam, often equipped with the M21 rifle, a highly accurate, scoped version of the semi-automatic M14 infantry rifle, provided a crucial long-range precision capability in an environment where traditional infantry tactics were often frustrated by the elusive enemy. Sniper teams conducted patrols, set ambushes in carefully chosen locations along enemy movement routes, and engaged high-value targets or enemy soldiers attempting to set up their own ambushes, often at ranges exceeding 500 yards, sometimes pushing out towards 1,000 yards or more with exceptional shots. This provided a strategic and tactical advantage that the enemy, relying more on close-quarters engagements and ambushes, often lacked. The M21, while semi-automatic, proved reliable and accurate in the harsh jungle conditions, becoming an iconic weapon of the Vietnam War sniper. Other nations also employed snipers, each adapting to their specific operational environment and equipment. The latter half of the 20th century and the dawn of the 21st century have seen military conflicts shift further towards complex urban environments, sprawling, complex cityscapes with multiple levels and hiding places, asymmetrical warfare against non-state actors who blend with civilian populations, and operations in arid, vast desert terrain with extreme distances and environmental challenges. Snipers, ever adaptable, evolved yet again to meet these new demands. Urban sniping requires detailed knowledge of building structures, firing angles from windows and rooftops, and the critical, often difficult, ability to differentiate combatants from civilians in chaotic, crowded environments. Operating in non-linear battle spaces demands constant vigilance, rapid target identification, and precise decision-making under pressure. Desert environments, conversely, demand mastery of incredibly long distances, understanding the significant effects of heat, dust, and intense sunlight mirage on ballistics and visibility. Camouflage against sand, rock, and sparse vegetation is essential, as is managing limited water resources and dealing with extreme temperatures that can affect both the soldier and their equipment. The dry air and vast, open spaces create unique challenges for judging distance, reading wind, and finding concealment. This continuous evolution, from the static trenches of WWI, through the global battlefields of WWI, the jungles of Southeast Asia, and into the complex urban and desert environments of today, underscores a fundamental truth about the sniper's strength. It lies not just in their incredible marksmanship, but perhaps even more so, in their unparalleled adaptability and ability to apply their core skills to any environment. From the muddy, broken ground of WWI, where concealment meant becoming one with the earth, to the modern battlefield, where it means blending into urban clutter, disappearing into the complex micro-terrain of a desert wadi, or mastering the physics of hitting a target over a mile away in challenging climates. The core skills of observation, concealment, and precision are constantly refined and applied to new environments, new enemies, and new threats. The specific tactics, techniques, and technology evolve rapidly. But the essence of the shadow hunter, the unseen precision instrument, remains the same, a testament to the enduring utility and flexibility of this specialized role in the ever-changing face of warfare. Every era of conflict, in every corner of the globe, has produced individuals whose deeds with a rifle have become the stuff of legend, whose names are whispered with a mixture of awe, respect, and sometimes fear by both friend and foe. These are the men who, through a combination of extraordinary skill, profound patience, tactical brilliance, and unwavering nerve, embodied the pinnacle capabilities of the elite sniper, leaving behind legacies etched into the grim history of warfare, sometimes celebrated for their bravery, sometimes viewed with the cold, hard lens of the grim reality of their trade. From the mud and blood of World War I emerged figures who transcended the anonymity of the trenches to become genuine heroes. One such legend was Francis Peggy Pegamagabo, an Ojibwe soldier serving with the Canadian Forces. Pegamagabo's official record is astounding. He was credited with an astonishing 378 enemy kills and the capture of 300 prisoners. These numbers alone place him among the top snipers of the war, if not the top. But his effectiveness went far beyond mere statistics. Pegamagabo possessed exceptional tracking and scouting abilities, skills honed from his traditional upbringing in the wilderness of Canada before the war. These skills made him a master of infiltration and observation in the complex, dangerous environment of trench warfare and no man's land. He could move unseen and unheard through areas other soldiers wouldn't dare enter, gather critical intelligence on enemy positions and movements, and position himself for deadly, precise shots from unexpected angles. He earned the military medal 3 times, a truly rare and distinguished achievement for a soldier, underscoring not only his unparalleled skill as a sniper, but also his immense bravery and effectiveness in direct combat situations alongside his sniping duties. His ability to combine traditional, ancestral skills with modern military tactics made him a uniquely effective and deeply respected soldier by his comrades. Another World War I standout, who carved his legend in a different, equally brutal theater, was Australia's Billy Singh, of Chinese and English descent. Singh was known fittingly as the assassin of Gallipoli, operating in the brutal, close-quarters campaign fought on the rugged, unforgiving hillsides of the Gallipoli Peninsula in Turkey. The terrain at Gallipoli was challenging, steep, broken ground with lines often closer than those on the Western Front, making every movement potentially fatal and requiring mastery of concealment in rocky, sparse terrain. Singh was officially credited with approximately 150 confirmed kills during the campaign, though some estimates based on contemporary accounts and the sheer terror his presence instilled in the enemy lines are significantly higher. possibly reaching over 200. His effectiveness was so profound and disruptive to the Ottoman forces that their command reportedly offered bounties specifically for his capture or death. Singh worked closely with a dedicated spotter, Private Ayan Idris, who would use a spotting scope to help locate targets in the complex terrain, assess distances, and call corrections for the tricky winds swirling around the hills. This partnership between sniper and spotter, crucial to maximizing effectiveness and safety, was beginning to be formally recognized as essential during this era. Singh's story highlights the significant impact a single, deadly marksman could have even in campaigns that weren't dominated by static trench lines, but where precision fire could break stalemates and demoralize the enemy. World War II saw the rise of snipers who became genuine national icons, particularly on the brutal Eastern Front. Perhaps the most legendary and feared of all was the Finnish sniper, Simo Häyhä, known chillingly as the White Death by the Soviet soldiers who faced him. Häyhä fought against the invading Soviet Union during the Winter War of 1939 to 1940. This conflict was fought in incredibly harsh, unforgiving conditions, with temperatures routinely dropping below 20 degrees Fahrenheit and in deep, often chest-high snow. Astonishingly, Häyhä achieved most of his unparalleled success using the simple iron sights on his Finnish-produced Mosin Nagant rifle, choosing not to use a telescopic scope. He found scopes prone to fogging and breaking in the extreme cold and believed they made a sniper a larger, more visible target by requiring them to raise their head higher, operating often alone, wearing white camouflage that blended seamlessly with the snowy landscape. Häyhä was credited with over 500 confirmed kills using his rifle in under 100 days of combat, an almost unbelievable rate of success that earned him the chilling moniker, the White Death, from the terrified Soviets. He developed unique and ingenious tactics, like packing snow in front of his position to conceal his muzzle flash and absorbing the slight puff of snow, and even keeping snow in his mouth to prevent his breath from steaming visibly in the frigid air and revealing his location. His ability to operate undetected and kill effectively in such brutal, extreme conditions remains unparalleled and is a testament to his mastery of fieldcraft and basic marksmanship. On the Soviet side of the Eastern Front, Vasily Zaitsev became a national hero and a powerful symbol of Soviet resistance during the desperate Battle of Stalingrad in 1942 to 1943. Credited with over 240 confirmed kills during the brutal, close-quarters urban fighting, Zaitsev's story was heavily promoted in Soviet propaganda, inspiring countless other soldiers and citizens to take up sniping. He wasn't just a deadly shot. He was instrumental in establishing a sniper school in Stalingrad amidst the ruins, training dozens of other effective snipers, Zaychata, or Little Hares, referencing his name, propagating his skills and techniques for urban combat. Zaitsev was also famously involved in legendary sniper duels, most notably, and perhaps semi-mythologized for propaganda purposes, with a supposedly elite German counter-sniper sent specifically to hunt him and demoralize the Soviet defenders. While the exact details of this particular duel may be embellished, the idea of the sniper duel, a personal, high-stakes battle of wits and skill between two deadly experts, captured the public imagination on both sides. Zaitsev's ability to operate and kill effectively in the horrific, close quarters, building by building urban combat of Stalingrad demonstrated the crucial adaptability required for the sniper role, proving their immense value not just in open fields, but in the complex, deadly terrain of a destroyed city. Moving into the Vietnam War, U.S. Marine Corps sniper Carlos Hathcock became one of America's most famous and revered snipers. Known affectionately as White Feather, due to the distinctive white feather he wore in the band of his bush hat as a challenge and a way for fellow Marines to recognize him. Hathcock was officially credited with 93 confirmed kills during his multiple tours. However, due to the strict rules for kill confirmation during that era, requiring an officer witness in addition to his spotter, he and many others who knew his capabilities estimated his actual count was significantly higher, potentially numbering in the hundreds. Hathcock completed missions that became legendary within the sniper community and are still studied today. One involved a painstaking, incredibly difficult multi-day stalk, reportedly 4 days and 3 nights, across challenging enemy-held terrain to reach a position from which he could successfully kill a high-ranking North Vietnamese Army general from over 1,000 yards away. This mission required immense physical and mental endurance, fieldcraft mastery, and unwavering patience. Another famous, almost unbelievable account describes him killing an enemy sniper by shooting directly through the man's rifle scope. The bullet reportedly traveling down the scope tube and hitting the enemy sniper in the eye. While seemingly miraculous, this shot is mechanically possible under the right circumstances and range. Hathcock's profound patience, exceptional fieldcraft in the brutal jungle, unparalleled nerve under pressure, and dedication to protecting his fellow Marines solidified his status as a true master of his craft and an enduring hero. In the modern era, particularly during the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan in the early 21st century, figures like U.S. Navy SEAL Chris Kyle gained significant prominence, largely due to his memoir and subsequent film. Known among his comrades as the Legend for his high kill count, Kyle served multiple tours in Iraq and was officially credited with 160 confirmed kills by the Department of Defense, though he himself claimed many more in his autobiography. Kyle became known for his effectiveness in complex urban environments during intense battles like the Battle of Fallujah, operating from rooftops, windows, or within buildings. Kyle and other snipers provided crucial overwatch and precision fire support to ground troops engaged in deadly street-to-street fighting against insurgents. They neutralized enemy fighters attempting to set ambushes, machine gunners firing on friendly forces, and other threats that pinned down infantry. His autobiography, American Sniper, and the subsequent highly successful film brought the often unseen, often misunderstood, and controversial world of the modern military sniper into mainstream public consciousness, sparking widespread discussion and debate about the role, impact, and psychological toll of the job in contemporary warfare. These individuals, Pegah Magabo from the trenches, Singh on the hills of Gallipoli, Heiha disappearing into the Finnish snow, Zaitsev fighting in the ruins of Stalingrad, Hathcock stalking through the Vietnamese jungle, Kyle in the urban landscapes of Iraq, from different nations, different conflicts, and vastly different eras, share common traits that define the elite sniper extraordinary marksmanship skill. Almost unimaginable patience, profound mental toughness, and the chilling ability to make split-second, life-or-death decisions under extreme pressure. Their stories, while sometimes embellished by the passage of time or molded by propaganda, highlight the critical, often disproportionate, role the individual sniper plays in the vast, chaotic theater of war. They are the sharp, precise edge of the spear, operating where technology, psychology, fieldcraft, and sheer human will converge to deliver decisive impact. They represent the pinnacle of individual combat effectiveness, feared by the enemy and highly valued by their own forces, more than perhaps any other role in combat. Sniping demands a unique, incredibly challenging, and sometimes profoundly taxing psychological profile. It is a job defined by stark extremes hours, sometimes days, of utter stillness, silence, and acute sensory deprivation, punctuated by moments of intense, lethal action requiring absolute focus, technical precision, and immediate, critical decision-making. It involves profound isolation, deployed far forward or on the fringes of the main force, cut off from the immediate camaraderie and mutual support of larger units, yet demands the absolute necessity of seamless, trusting teamwork with a single partner, their spotter. It requires the mental detachment necessary to view a target from afar through a scope, often observing them for a period, coupled with the heavy, undeniable, and deeply personal reality of taking a human life. The core of the sniper's immense mental challenge is the requirement for almost superhuman patience and unwavering focus over extended periods. A sniper team might deploy to a concealed position and remain there for 24, 48, even 72 hours or more without significant movement, sometimes without speaking above a whisper, enduring extreme physical discomfort and mental monotony. They must endure hunger, thirst, biting insects, searing heat, freezing cold, driving rain, or blinding dust storms, sometimes all within a single mission, all while maintaining absolute vigilance and operational readiness. Every muscle must be controlled, every urge to shift weight, scratch an itch, cough, or adjust position must be suppressed. They must manage physiological needs discreetly within their hide. This level of physical stillness and mental discipline goes far beyond standard military requirements. It is a deep, internal stillness, a profound level of self-mastery forged through rigorous physical and mental conditioning, and driven by a powerful sense of mission and the understanding that the slightest lapse could mean discovery and failure, or worse, death. Their brain and body must learn to override natural impulses to remain statuesque and alert. Isolation is another defining feature of the sniper's world. While they typically operate in a two-man team with a spotter, a partnership that becomes an absolute lifeline and their universe for the duration of the mission, they are often positioned miles forward of the main lines, deep within enemy territory, or on the vulnerable fringes of the battlefield. They are cut off from the immediate camaraderie, the shared stress relief of joking or talking with a squad, and the inherent mutual support of larger units. They are the tip of the spear, a self-contained unit relying solely on their own skills, their partner's judgment, and their understanding of the mission parameters. This physical and psychological separation can breed a sense of detachment from the rest of the force, a feeling of being outsiders, separate observers looking in on the chaos from a hidden, solitary vantage point. The bond between the sniper and the spotter becomes paramount. They are each other's only human connection, their sounding board, their immediate support structure, relying completely on each other for security, observation, and survival in their solitary, high-stakes world. Trust in their partner's competence and vigilance is absolute. And then, there is the moment of truth, the culmination of hours or days of waiting and enduring. After prolonged observation, the target appears. The world narrows drastically to the view within the rifle scope. Adrenaline surges through the body, but must be controlled, channeled into focused action, not allowed to induce shakiness or tunnel vision. A split-second decision must be made, processing multiple complex factors almost simultaneously. Is this the correct target according to the strict rules of engagement and the mission objective? Is the shot viable given the myriad factors of range, wind, environmental conditions, and potential backdrops? What are the potential consequences of taking or not taking the shot? For the mission, for friendly forces, for civilians. The sniper must suppress all fear, all doubt, all hesitation, and execute the shot with flawless technical precision. This requires a level of calm under immense, immediate pressure that is truly extraordinary. Training emphasizes removing raw emotion from the act of shooting, reducing it, at that critical moment, to a complex technical problem involving physics and mechanics. A task to execute with cold efficiency and precision, but the fundamental human element cannot be entirely suppressed. Nor should it be for a professional soldier operating under strict military and ethical rules. The target is often a specific individual, an enemy officer whose death will disrupt command, a machine gunner pinning down friendly troops, someone identified as a direct, imminent threat that must be neutralized. Unlike the abstract, often impersonal destruction wrought by artillery barrages or aerial bombings, which deal in coordinates and generalized targets, the sniper's kill is intensely personal, even from hundreds or thousands of yards away. They see their target clearly in the crosshairs, often observing them for a period before taking the shot. This directness, combined with the act of deliberately taking a life from a distance, can lead to profound psychological effects, sometimes immediately, sometimes manifesting long after the conflict is over. The weight of taking a human life, viewed with stark clarity through the scope, can be a heavy, enduring burden that requires significant coping mechanisms and mental resilience. Rigorous psychological and physical training plays a crucial, indispensable role in preparing snipers for this immense mental gauntlet. They are deliberately pushed to their physical and mental limits, subjected to sleep deprivation, forced marches with heavy gear over long distances and difficult terrain, and complex scenarios designed to test their decision-making under intense pressure and fatigue. This isn't just physical conditioning, it's building mental resilience, stress inoculation, and the ability to perform under duress. They learn complex techniques to control their breathing, regulate their heartbeat, and maintain intense focus amidst physical discomfort and psychological chaos. They are taught to view their targets not as innocent civilians, but as direct, active threats to their own forces. Threats that must be neutralized to protect the lives of their comrades and the success of the mission. This psychological framing is a necessary, carefully constructed defense mechanism, allowing them to perform their duty effectively within the harsh realities of combat. The partnership between the sniper and the spotter is more than just functionally necessary. It's a fundamental pillar of their psychological well-being and operational effectiveness. They are a two-person unit that trains together extensively, becoming deeply attuned to each other's strengths, weaknesses, and nonverbal cues. They rely on each other implicitly for survival and mission success. The spotter is far more than just an assistant. They are an equal partner who provides security, assists with target acquisition, calculates range and ballistic solutions, interprets complex environmental data like wind and mirage, observes the shot's impact or splash to help the sniper make rapid corrections for follow-up shots, and maintains security for the sniper who is vulnerable while focused on the scope. In the intense isolation of their position, the spotter is the sniper's only human connection, their sounding board, their immediate support structure. This deep bond of mutual trust and absolute reliance is forged through shared hardship, long hours of intense training together, and an understanding that their lives depend on each other's competence, vigilance, and dedication. The psychological resilience of an elite sniper is arguably their most vital weapon, as crucial to their success and survival as their rifle or their optics. It's the ability to compartmentalize emotion when necessary, to endure extreme physical and mental hardship with unwavering discipline, to focus relentlessly on the task at hand despite immense internal and external pressures, and to carry the immense weight of their actions. They walk a fine, necessary line between clinical detached execution of a mission, and the unavoidable, deeply human reality of their lethal trade, making them some of the most psychologically tested, resilient, and complex individuals in modern warfare. Their minds are as finely tuned, as carefully calibrated, and as crucial to their success as their rifles. Despite operating in small teams, often just alone with a spotter, deployed far forward, on the flanks, or deep within enemy territory, the impact of elite snipers on the course of battles, on enemy behavior, and even on entire campaigns can be disproportionately large and strategically significant. They represent a relatively small investment of personnel and resources compared to infantry companies, armored battalions, or air support. Yet their presence, or sometimes simply the fear of their presence, can dramatically alter enemy actions, influence friendly strategy, and achieve effects far beyond simply reducing enemy numbers. This is their asymmetric advantage. One of the most immediate and significant impacts of snipers is on enemy morale, psychology, and freedom of movement. Knowing that an unseen enemy observer, capable of delivering lethal precision from hundreds or even thousands of yards away, is potentially watching their every move creates a pervasive sense of dread, vulnerability, and paranoia that can cripple effectiveness. Simple actions that soldiers might otherwise take for granted, moving between positions, gathering for a briefing, using a radio, conducting reconnaissance patrols, or even just showing oneself for a brief moment, become fraught with unacceptable danger. This constant, unseen threat forces enemy troops to remain huddled in cover, severely restricts their movement, particularly during daylight hours, makes essential tasks like resupply and communication more difficult and dangerous, and relentlessly erodes their confidence, discipline, and willingness to maneuver or expose themselves, ultimately making them less effective fighters. The psychological pressure of being hunted by an invisible enemy can be debilitating to an entire unit. Snipers are also incredibly powerful force multipliers, particularly in defensive operations or when supporting friendly maneuvers. By surgically eliminating key enemy personnel, officers issuing commands, non-commissioned officers leading patrols or organizing defenses, radio operators coordinating units, machine gunners providing overwhelming suppressing fire, or forward observers calling in artillery or air support, they can instantly disrupt enemy command and control structures, degrade their immediate firepower, and sow confusion and disorganization. A single, well-aimed shot from a sniper can neutralize a significant, immediate threat to friendly forces, halt an enemy assault before it gains momentum, or cripple a key enemy position by removing its leadership or most dangerous weapon system. This allows friendly forces to hold ground more effectively, maneuver more safely, or counterattack with greater success. Conversely, in offensive operations or during patrols, snipers provide crucial overwatch and protection for advancing troops. Positioned on high ground, on flanks, or ahead of the main advance, they can scan the terrain with powerful optics, identify hidden threats like enemy machine gun nests, anti-tank positions, improvised explosive devices, or concealed enemy personnel that might otherwise ambush friendly forces. They can then suppress enemy fire from key points with precise shots or neutralize these threats entirely, providing a safer path for infantry to advance. They act as the crucial, long-range eyes of the advancing force, clearing the way and preventing costly, potentially devastating engagements with unseen or dug-in enemies. The intelligence gathering and surveillance role of snipers is often overlooked in popular portrayals, but it is absolutely critical and frequently the primary objective of a mission, even more so than direct engagement. Equipped with incredibly powerful optics, binoculars and spotting scopes capable of seeing fine detail at long ranges, Snipers can observe enemy positions, assess troop strength, identify types of equipment, map defensive layouts, track enemy movements, and report on enemy activities in meticulous detail from a relatively safe, concealed distance. This real-time Jatsan, granular information is invaluable for strategic planning at higher command levels, helping commanders understand the battlefield situation, identify weaknesses in enemy defenses, track enemy movements, and make informed, precise decisions about troop deployment, targeting, and objectives. Many sniper missions are primarily focused on reconnaissance and surveillance, with direct engagement only authorized against specific targets of opportunity or necessity determined by the mission commander.